Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and we're exploring the wonderful region of the Cotswolds in southwest England. We've decided to revisit the centre of the region and find some hidden gems, places that are not quite so famous, but still just as beautiful. Today you find Ross, Widget, Gizmo and me in the little village of Hatherop. We're still in the Coln Valley. Some of you who've been watching our stuff regularly will know we've been walking down this valley for a while. This little village I first visited when I was really small, about 2 or 3 years old, because my sister was at school in Hatherop Castle behind me. I have to admit, I don't remember a single thing about it, so I'm having just as much fun as you discovering it. We're going to show you around. Come with me. On our journey down the River Coln, we've been constantly surprised and enthralled by the beauty of the little villages on its banks. It really is one of the most wonderful rivers in England. We come now to Hatherop, a small village with a big history, and a place that has a slightly weird place in my own life. Many, many years ago, my sister Kate was sent away to boarding school here, aged about 14, making me only 4. She was then, as she is now, my biggest idol and favourite sibling, and I missed her terribly. My mother comforted me with a description of Hatherop Castle, as the school was called then, as it is now, as a romantic place where she would be very happy. So it is associated for me with mixed feelings, a sense of loss, but also a sense of pleasure that my lovely sister would be happy in her beautiful castle. Of course, since then, I've discovered she was anything but. Our English boarding school system really does seem more than a little archaic these days. In the early 1950s, it was just the thing to do for people like us whose parents worked so much of their lives abroad. Pretty miserable for all concerned, frankly, including the parents. Anyway, enough of that. Hatherop sits above the river, and the story of this place is more about the land, the families who owned and cared for it, than the buildings that sit on it. For a start, the castle isn't a castle. It's a splendid house with a castellated tower, but whilst the tower is probably medieval, the building was severely damaged by fire in 1844, just a few years ago by the standards of this part of the world, and completely rebuilt, starting in 1850, by the architect Henry Clutton, an expert in French medieval architecture. In 1854, whilst the castle rebuild was still going on, Clutton also rebuilt the church next door, along with his protégé, William Burgess, whose influence is clearly seen in the mortuary South Chapel, on behalf of the de Morley family. A white marble effigy of Barbara, Lady de Morley, who died in 1844, lies in the chapel. In the mid-19th century, the whole 3,000-acre estate was bought by a wealthy cotton spinner from Lancashire called Basley. Basley's heir was his son, Sir Thomas Stafford Basley, who was born in 1907 and came of age in 1928. He lived at Hatherop until the house was requisitioned for military use in 1941. He was married in 1945, but any idea of returning to live at Hatherop Castle in the pre-war manner, with dozens of staff to look after them and a life of largely leisurely pursuits, must have seemed impossibly remote. Have we not seen that very situation discussed in detail in the television series Downton Abbey recently? And in 1946, he leased the house for use as the aforementioned girls' secondary school and went to live at East Leach Downs Farm on the estate, where he became an early advocate for organic farming. He eventually sold the freehold of Hatherop Castle to the school in 1972, but retained the rest of the estate intact, maintaining a close control over the villages of Hatherop and East Leach, so as to preserve the rural way of life and a community spirit, until he died in 1997. In this time of great uncertainty in the rural life of England, with a government apparently determined to undermine the patchwork of ownership that has served us so well over the last few hundred years, this determination of his perhaps seems to us particularly admirable. His children, keen to honour his commitment to the integrity of the estate, but needing to turn the estate into cash, sold it in 2002 to the locally based Ernest Cook Trust, which already owned the adjacent Fairford Park estate. Now, the Ernest Cook Trust is a great organisation, teaching young people about country management and giving many who would never otherwise have it the opportunity to experience country activities. I happen to know that now, at the beginning of 2025, the Trust is looking for a river manager to look after the stretch of the Coln that comes with the estate. If only I was 20 years younger. The village of Hatherop grew up around the castle, some built by the Ponsonby family and more added later by the Basley family. The cottages opposite the path that leads to the church are dated 1868 and are particularly nice. Having revisited Hatherop, I think I have completely discarded my resentment towards the place for removing my sister, and heartily recommend a walk along the banks of the Coln, with the castle looming above and the countryside warming the soul. I hope you've enjoyed our little trip around Hatherop. It's been great for me to revisit because the name is sort of sentimental to me, because my sister was here at school when I was just a tiny child. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Press the little bell icon so that we can let you know whenever we post something. And we will see you again very soon, somewhere else in the Cotswolds.